We are now officially recording, and I'm going to get us started. Good morning, everybody. Ashland's Council on Public Transportation and MTAP welcome you to the 2020 virtual winter meeting. Just a couple of housekeeping items. Please stay on mute. Feel free to show your camera to show that we know that you're on. But just again, please stay muted while presentations are going on. Feel free to use the chat to talk to anybody, including the panelists on this meeting. It is very helpful. We collect them and we will ask questions at the end of presentations. And again, all the information, all the presentations, the recording, once it's available, will be posted on the MTAP website. So I'm cutting off those questions early on. But in the next, I would like to now turn this over to kick off our session number 6 to Don Chartok, chair of MTAP and from Washington State DOT. Don, please kick it away.
Welcome, everybody. Today is the practical day. When I was looking through the agenda for this week, I was like, oh, this is the one. This is the day where we have to send all sorts of staff. I'm really glad that Richard is recording these. Every time I see a session or listen to a session, I say to myself, oh, I think of one more person that should know about this information. So thank you for doing that. I have just gone from dark to dark gray here in the Pacific Northwest, and so that means it's time to get started. Big thank you to both Black Cat and Route Match by Uber. Thank you very much for your support for this conference. It makes it happen, and you can see our premier sponsors for AASHTO up on the screen at this moment. Make sure you log in today. We were doing virtual roll call. So in the chat, you can write your name, your title, your org, and that way we'll track who's here rather than trying to go through the entire country. As I said, you can see now up there the agenda for the day. I think it's really going to be a lot of good practical knowledge. And with that, I'll hand off to Rachel.
Thanks, Don. Good morning, everybody. My name is Rachel Pallister, and I'm with Panther International. And welcome to, like Don said, a very practical day, especially this session. Grant and subrecipient management and the tools and practices. So this morning's session is really laid out to help you guys at the state DOTs to learn about the processes and techniques that you're all using that can help make your jobs more efficient and managing all of the state and federal programs that you're overseeing, in addition to the oversight of your agencies. As you all know very well, the state DOTs play such a pivotal and key role in the success of their agencies in each state, which ultimately that trickles down to the riders of those systems, and that is a direct impact on their livelihood. So what you do is very, very important. So this morning's session will be a really great opportunity for you to hear and discuss best practices amongst each other, to generate ideas, and hear how other states are utilizing a variety of tools and methods, like Black Cat being one of those, to more efficiently manage the many facets that you're overseeing. I came from a state DOT, so I know all of the many hats that you have to wear while managing the programs and the subrecipients. So today we're very excited for our 3 amazing panelists to tell you how they're managing their programs and assisting their agencies during these very unique new times that we're in. So with that, I'd like to introduce our very first panelist, which is Chuck Dyer. So Chuck has been managing the Ohio DOT Office of Transit since 2015. And Chuck's prior experience was working as a project manager in transportation. Chuck is a graduate from and he emphasizes the Ohio State University, and he lives on a small farm with his wife and 3 boys and a plethora of animals. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chuck.
Fantastic, and thanks for the introduction. And the Ohio State, the Big Ten is bending the rules for the Ohio State this year. So I'm kind of on the fence with that one. I'm not sure that should be the case. Vanna, next slide, please, Richard. All right, so at ODOT, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we have done. We were one of the first users of Black Cat back in the day. Scott can probably remember when that first occurred. But I want to kind of talk about like looking back, 10 years ago when we got started and some of the lessons learned. And I think when I get into this, I'm going to learn that, the challenges we have at the DOT were not unlike anyone else who's trying to do similar efforts. We always refer to ourselves in transit as the small fish in the large pond or the big pond, right? And the systems that ODOT has in our financial world are larger agency resources, right? Like what's in the financial office at ODOT are created more towards, FHWA and the larger programs that we manage over there. And so what has occurred from that is that the way that the Office of Transit has historically, going back 20, 30 years even, has partaken that is they created these one-off processes. And that's got some good and it's got some bad to it, right? The advantages that Black Cat offered is it's a product that is geared towards FTA and transit grants and managing those systems. And so that's an advantage that you could have over a home built system where you have to determine and figure those out and roll with the changes as they do come from FTA. But no matter, my point here, and I'll get to this at the end, is no matter what system you're building, what's really kind of as important is that you can connect and be part of the larger network that manages the entire program. And I'll get into that a little bit later. For those young people that are in the audience today, as young as in younger than me, and I'm 40 by the way, what you're looking at the screen is a screen from a system called MS-DOS, Microsoft Operating System. And this was something that was used in the 1980s, right, as primarily through the 1980s, and it was stopped being maintained and updated in 2000. But however, and I'm sure that there's a handful, if not more than a handful, 2 handfuls of state agencies that are still using this. This is the system that ODOT, Ohio Department of Transportation, uses to manage our financial system. So next slide, please. And so, there's a lot of challenges, that's obvious challenges as being part of this older system, right? We're dependent upon their processes that were in place. Their strategy becomes how do you work with, or in our case, how do you work around these older systems? ODOT, because the system is so old and it's hard to support, they're not interested in having another system touch this MS-DOS system, right? They're not going to modify it to allow another data set to come in. And so what we did in our past, our kind of lessons learned for ODOT, is that we created this Black Cat system completely outside of our financial system. And that creates problems because the Black Cat system has to essentially stop, print to paper, and then connect to the other system. And likewise, our financial system would have to stop, print to paper, and then be manually put into our other system. So again, for the young people in the room, you didn't get to play Oregon Trail, but that's one of the famous little scenes from Oregon Trail. Next slide, please. But what ODOT does have is, and sorry for the genericness of the slide, ODOT systems that are connected are these 3 systems. Appropriations accounting is that old MS-DOS system, and then current bill is another program that's equally as old that's used to put together the billings both for FHWA and FTA. So those systems work in tandem, but there is another system that ODOT has had since the early 2000s, is this ELLIS system. And ELLIS is the only system that is able to connect with AA. So there's an advantage with going down that road. Richard, next slide. So ELLIS is a web-based project management application tool that's used to manage the $4 billion program that ODOT does on an annual basis, right? And again, like I said in the beginning, this system was designed specifically for FHWA. Now, when we went into Black Cat, they were trying to get us into the same system, but we went with Black Cat originally. and they wanted us to bend the rules and use the system in a different way to make it work for us. And we said no. Ultimately, what just recently happened is they developed a module for Ellis that works with the way transit programs do. It works a little more similar to the way in Black Cat does, right? And so this is where ODOT's heading as far as managing our larger grants and our projects, our program of projects that we issue across the state. And this gives us an advantage because it puts our data in the same sources that's used to develop the financial and management reports used by the larger DOT. Next slide, please. You know, I think we missed one, Richard, if we could go back. All right, the advantages of being in the Ellis is obviously the financial data, the encumbrances, budget, and balances are used. The Ellis is where the ODOT develops its STIP. So having the projects be in Ellis means they're automatically folded into the STIP process. And like I said, it connects to that old MS-DOS system. And the way we designed Ellis is to replicate what FTA's grant system does and develop the program of projects. We can track, you know, the status of grants and the individual status of projects and connect with its financial system. So I was just gonna, in the next few slides, show you a little bit of what and how the system works. We won't get into too much detail. Next slide. And so this is a home screen for Ellis. This identifies a higher level details, right? That the fact that it's a transit project amongst the highway project. And if you look closer at the details, you can see this is for CARES Act. You can see that Alex in my office is a project manager. And this is where we have the ability to add fields and add data that we need for sorting. Next slide, please. And along with this, when you dive deeper into each of these programs, you get to then, just like Black Hat, you assign grant details, right? This is the funding page that we get to assign a grant. And I highlighted some specific areas. It has our grant number. It says the status of the grant as it is in FTA, and then the grant description and grant completion date. And similarly, you're able to program into different projects associated with the grant. And so from there, in the next step, you're able to then associate a list and record the individual projects that were within the federal project grant number 1, 2, 3, or 4, or using the suffix in this case A1, A2, A3, and A4. So next slide. And so this next slide is our interactive tool that basically builds a similar program of projects. And let's go ahead in the next slide. I think I highlighted some specific areas. And so this is where, yeah, you can start seeing where it's sorted by scope and then ALI, and it's giving individual project amounts and all the details associated with these projects. And you know, the big advantage to ODOT is because we were managing these POPs. We never really got good at managing them in Black Hat, and they were managing them in Excel. By having this in a system like either this Ellis system or in Black Hat, it really helps improve your accuracy, and for us has improved our accuracy greatly, right? Because you're not worried about versions, and if you save something or if you wrote over a cell that has some coding in it. So for us, this is also able to show us, you know, again, the grant status was the estimate amount, what the approved original amount or the approved budget revision was, because we always need to go back to that original amount when producing our program project. All right, next slide, please. But there's a lot of things that Ellis can't do, right? We get so close into this process of being able to do it all, but Black Hat, or I'm sorry, but Ellis, it cannot connect with trans data. I'm not sure there's anyone that connects with trans data, but I think it's something that we as an industry want to work towards. It doesn't allow subrecipients access. It has no touch points with subrecipients at all, right? It doesn't do grant applications. It doesn't do invoicing, program oversight, document management, you know, and these individual bullets here is how we're using Black Hat as interface with our subrecipients. They're familiar with it, they like it, it works well for them. And so now our next goal is next slide, Richard, is try to figure out how to make these systems connect, right? We have the blue is what's in FTA. And I have to say that's, I think Black Hat, when I was talking to Scott a few years ago, that's always been, in the dreams to try to make data available from FTA to share directly with Black Hat and with our system. So we're kind of working in these three different bubbles. And ELIS is, in our world, is the only tool that, for now, ODOT's going to allow touch appropriations accounting. So we are limited to go around ELIS. And so next slide, Richard. So really what's going on currently with ODOT Black Hat Aviation, because many DOTs also award aviation dollars. Black Hat also has a module that's worked for aviation. So Panther or Black Hat is working to develop an interface that's going to allow Black Hat to talk with ELIS. And so this is going to be a link that's going to be really important to us because of how we're using Black Hat. And thus we're going to be able to get the information into one central area. Next slide, Richard. And I wanted to talk about this really briefly about, it's such a simple concept, right? The point is trying to find one product that's going to do everything for you is super challenging. It has been for ODOT, and I'm sure it is for any DOT because you're working with these larger systems and these legacy systems. But even at ODOT has this, in the last administration, I think 3 years ago, they started this Drive Ohio, right? Its goal is committed to advancing smart mobility in Ohio, one-stop shop for development and being all awesome as we move forward. Next slide, Richard. And one of their first goals is to do a data sharing for transport purposes, right? And I find it kind of ironic that we are putting this ESP, this event streaming platform out there for the sole purpose of sharing data. However, we can't share encumbrance data with another system. It's just kind of the irony, I guess, that we live in, and how being part of a small fish in a big pond and understanding, I guess, where you fit in those priorities. So this idea of sharing data is definitely not new. But in any system and any improvements that you do along the way, it's important to consider what you can and can't do, but also how you can share data between the two systems, because that's, in my opinion, where the future is going, right? You're not going to have a one-stop shop that meets all. And so, Richard, last slide, I think I just have some of my contact information. So that's it for me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chuck. So does anybody have any questions for Chuck? You're welcome to use the chat or to unmute your mic and speak up. We'd love to hear from you.
Now's the time, folks.
Something that, so here we go. We've got a question from Katie with Wisconsin. She said, was ELIS funded through federal funds or your state funds, Chuck?
ELIS was funded about 10 years ago, and it was initially a combination of FHWA funds and state gas tax funds. And that's how it's being supported today. So we don't have to put any, our program doesn't have to put any, transit program doesn't have to put any money into it to support it. And does ODOT have plans to get rid of MS-DOS altogether? There's I'm going to guess there's quite a few DOTs that are working on these legacy systems. We spent, I think, about $15 million trying to lay out a different solution, but the IT and finance divisions weren't able to get somewhere on that. And so it is a larger goal, and it's something that we're probably going to have to do sooner than later. I mean, I don't know how much longer you continue to support such an old system. So yeah, our goal is definitely to upgrade out of MS-DOS, 1980s software. Yeah, and I was reading the comment from Oregon, how they have a system that does allow document management, subrecipient access, and invoice, and it does have similar limitations regarding connections to other systems, right? Yeah, and I think that's always going to be the challenge, and that's how we're going to continue to work with Black Hat Panther, is to share data between the two different systems, because we're not going to have the one size that fits all.
Yeah, to kind of just add some context to that too, like you mentioned, here at Panther, We're all about making the states, helping make the states more efficient, and the integrity of the data, and just knowing how critical and important that is. So we're always looking for ways to integrate. We are working with Ohio right now on the transit side as well to integrate with the Ellis system, and we do it in a variety of other states as well. So any way that we can integrate and just make things more seamless and more connected, to just help make everybody's life a little bit easier. I came from a world at the state where it was just spreadsheets, so I totally understand just how much better and efficient it is to just have any system. And then once you have that, once you start integrating, it's just like another level up. So it's kind of baby steps. And I know, again, with the states, a lot of people are working off of those old systems. And you have the whole department kind of supporting something. It can take a lot of effort to kind of overcome that or start something new. But those having partnerships in your own DOT, so you can start having those conversations, is really important. And I think Ohio is a great example of that.
All right, thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, do we have any more questions for Chuck? And if not, we'll move on to our next presenter. But I want to give everybody a chance to speak up. We'll have some time at the very end as well. If you think of something and you want to put it in the chat, we can come back to it. Okay, well, let's move on. So I'm going to introduce our next panelist, Mr. Ian Ritz. So Ian is currently the chief of the transit section at the Wisconsin Department of Transportation, where he's worked since 2010. And he's passionate about the public and specialized transportation because it provides such important mobility options for people to commute to work and school, to make their medical appointments, and to participate in their other essential daily activities. And we all know just exactly how important that is to our communities. So with that, I'd like to introduce Ian and let him start his presentation.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to be here to speak. I'm going to take a little bit different angle to this grants and subrecipient management. I think Chuck's discussion was really insightful, kind of more internal activities for the DOT, specifically financial. And I can say in Wisconsin, we can empathize very closely to what Chuck described. We had a legacy DOS systems until about 2018, where at the state level across all agencies as an enterprise initiative to transition to a Oracle PeopleSoft system. So, we're only recently slightly more modern. So what I'm going to talk about is WisDOT and our role as the DOT in managing transit subrecipients more from like a federal compliance standpoint. So internal and now kind of talking about external. So next slide, please. To set the stage, I'll provide just a little bit of general information about transit in Wisconsin. Here's our profile here. The map is a 2020 map of our public transit systems. We have a number of communities with public transit, a variety of types of service, different modes. Shared ride taxi is our term. It's a demand response system, usually community-based. We have small urban bus. We have large urban bus. We have some rural bus, even commuter service, and a couple streetcars as well. And then several intercity bus routes. Across federal and state aid programs, annually it's about $215 million. Some of it is directly appropriated and a portion from the feds. A lot of it comes through the DOT as well. And just how transit's used. We know recent surveys, over half as used for work. So there's the picture. There's a snapshot of Wisconsin. Next slide, please. Kind of drilling it down a little bit further about what our role looks like at the DOT level. So focusing on 5311 subrecipients and 5310. We have a number of subrecipients, 50 public transit, again, a high number of shared ride taxi systems, but then also some some bus service, bus, maybe municipal level, but it may be county or multi-county as well. And then a number of of specialized transit grantees as well. Some of these organizations, have kind of like the traditional 5310 vehicle projects. Maybe they got a vehicle a few years ago. They're potentially not participating in the program every year, but they're still reporting operations, and so we still, maintain a level of oversight over them. And just give me one sec here. Oh, my 3.5-year-old helper just approached me here, and I'm gonna have to do something else real quick. Apologies to everyone. So, just in terms of the types of organizations, I think it's a relatively high number, probably not the highest in the country, but probably more so than a number of communities as well. So, that's kind of our lay of the land for who we're working with. Next slide, please. As a DOT, there are, different challenges that, I think we all can relate to in terms of working with these communities, different, different things that we all deal with that makes life difficult for us and maybe difficult for the locals as well. So, the most obvious one in my mind is that regulations are complicated, cumbersome, burdensome, restrictive, and organizations, in many times they're not enough staff for too many responsibilities. And so it's just kind of a challenge there. In some of these communities, we have a city clerk who, 5% of their time is managing the transit program. The service is contracted out. And so it's just trying to, make sure that we have enough resources and things available to help out that local person. In terms of, how that impacts us at the DOT, we have challenges with receiving information, policies, plans, data delayed, it's incomplete, it's inaccurate, and all this, leads to potentially, issues for the department downstream, in the form of, findings from federal reviews or, internal state reviews as well. Next slide, please. So, how, and I would, to be honest, this is something that, WSDOT had struggled with, more so for a number of years. And so how do we tackle that? How do we improve that? And, what we came up with, and this was a few years ago in 2015, was, we developed our subrecipient compliance site review program. And, to a large extent, it kind of mirrored what FTA does with states and transit systems in terms of kind of a periodic review. But we wanted to gear it more toward kind of that partner relationship and making sure we have, provide oversight, yes, but we're right there with them to provide the technical assistance. Being that willing partner to work with the organizations, and gain compliance together. Well, we do have consultant support in the form of a contract with RLS and Associates. We've been working with them for a number of years. They also provide assistance for our MTAP program, and they have our contract for compliance site reviews. And our goal is to reach every subrecipient on a 5-year basis. We do assess risk kind of based on project budget, sort of complexity of service, maybe a specific project that they've got going on. Different factors, but we kind of set up a 5-year cycle and adjust that as needed. Next slide, please. More specifically about our process to perform a site review is, we try to cluster things geographically. Wisconsin is, is a fairly large state. Madison, where we're based, is in the southern part of the state, and we have a number of our subrecipients, northern part. And but they are dispersed throughout. So we try to cluster them together where we can make a swing on a particular week. We go north central, northwest, northeast, et cetera, to kind of facilitate travel. We do also limit our program, like the reviews, time of year as well. So we kind of shy away from the winter months. You don't really want my staff to be trekking around northern Wisconsin, or our consultant flying in and traveling around as well. Just try to keep it on spring, summer, and fall to just be a little simpler and safer there. For the review itself, I kind of think about it in 3 different phases. There's the before, the during, and the after. So prior to review, we make sure we send out notification, we coordinate on a schedule, potential dates of what we're looking for. We share workbooks, and I'll talk a little bit more about the workbooks momentarily. And then there's also a desk review component. So we share things ahead of time and then have things transmitted back to us for kind of a pre-review. And then the day of, we try to schedule a full day. Most of the time, in pretty much every instance, one day has been satisfactory for us. We try to limit it to that. Sometimes it's a little bit quicker. There are some things that you really, you can't, or it's much more difficult to do remotely, but, we try to do things like, vehicle inspection to actually get our eyes on a particular vehicle on site, other things maybe around kind of facility, poking around a facility, things like that. And, obviously this in-person element has been completely suspended as a result of COVID. So since March, we've been doing every activity has been performed remotely, virtually. And I think, by and large, we've been able to kind of maintain the program, about as normal. So that hasn't been impacted too negatively from COVID. And then following the review, if there are things that need to be addressed, we put together a corrective action plan that kind of spells out what the compliance area is, what the sort of the deficiency was, and we also provide suggestions on how to remedy that. And then tying back to our sort of our goals and overall approach to the program, we try to provide as many examples and templates as we can to the subrecipients. So, it's not just asking them to fix something, it's asking them to fix it and providing, something tangible for them to get their hands on and look at and modify, rather than something more abstract. Next slide, please. The workbooks, we have 2 different types of workbooks, and they're fairly comprehensive. I mean, they're I forgot that the page total, but they're dozens and dozens of pages, and they really walk through all the requirements. 5310, I would say we have fewer elements, especially if the 5310 organization is really just your vehicle recipient. There aren't as many things to look at. 5311, obviously a big difference is drug and alcohol testing program and record keeping around that, but there's more potentially around kind of the finances and things like that. So there's some differences that there. At first we had just one workbook that had sections that you say skip this if you're a 5310, move along here. But we decided to simplify that even further and just carve out 2 separate workbooks that could be shared. It was just a little bit cleaner for the organizations. And the way we treat these is they're living documents. We put a lot of effort in upfront to develop them, and by and large the structure is the same, but regulations change, interpretations of regulations change. We simplified questions here and there, but we try to keep an active review going of those workbooks, and then just share the most updated version. I saw a comment just pop up about, are these available? I'll come on to that. The short answer is yes, it's all on our website, but I'll get to that a little bit further momentarily. And tying back to a comment earlier about sort of mirroring the federal requirements, and that's what we're doing. We have our 8 categories, core categories here. I'll let you just read them off. I'm not going to talk about them, but the idea was that we're going to address each of the areas that we as a state DOT are subject to. We're going to address those same areas with the subrecipient, so that we can have we can have, you know, a pretty clear line of what's the term, flow down to the organizations. Next slide, please. And here's a snapshot. It's a little bit dated, but it's just something that we, you know, periodically, you know, annually, we kind of reflect on how the reviews have gone, and looking at the categories of where we find deficiencies, and then, you know, with the goal of then, you know, sort of refocusing on those areas, potentially trying to enhance our support and resources to assist those folks. Maybe there's trainings, maybe something we address through, you know, RTAP trainings or other, you know, outreach and things like that. So, you know, it's just a snapshot there. Next slide, please. You know, touching the lessons learned in a moment, but you know, earlier I mentioned, you know, this is something that WSDOT struggled with. You know, truthfully, we had a few state management reviews in a row where we had struggled with you know, compliance in this area, the subrecipient management. But since we've implemented this CSR program, we've really improved in those areas. And you know, to the point in the last state management review, we didn't have any findings of these. You know, more than that, we've also had, you know, by and large, very positive feedback from the organizations. I think to a large extent, you know, the folks we work with are, you know, they're pleased that we're giving them attention, and we're trying to help them. You know, I think a lot of the times they just say, you know, we want to do the right thing, we just don't know what it is necessarily. And so we provided some good education, I think. And, you know, the lessons learned here, try to be positive. You know, we are from the government and we're here to help you. I think there's a level of persistency that needs to be applied here. No one really likes dealing with audits. No one really likes dealing with audit findings, but you know, so we just have that kind of constant checking in. Hey, how you doing? Do you need any assistance? You know, please, let's follow up on this. And, you know, we do try to leverage technology, and this is where, you know, I can connect to, you know, our resources with Panther and Black Cat. We have that. We've had it for 6 or so years now, and it is helpful at all phases of this process. So, you know, the pre, during, and post, we use it to look at organizational information, look at projects, budget, finance, asset information. We also use the system to be a repository for different policy and plan information, so that a subrecipient can upload things there. We can pull it from there. You know, it works very well for us. So it's a really important tool to facilitate this whole compliance site review program. And then, you know, I'll wrap up here by just saying, you know, something else that has been valuable for us is making sure that our staff person who manages CSRs is also working with our program managers, so that there, you know, is that communication and connection where they can say, okay, I'm going out to ABC organizations, you know, what's going on there? Are there any things I should be looking at specifically? You know, what context can you provide? And that's been really powerful. And then the last, tying back to the analysis, is we want to look at how we're doing and where things are going well and where they're not, and try to use that to tweak the program going forward. And with that, we can go to the next slide. Here is you know, just my contact information, and then that URL is actually the DOT web page that has the information about this program altogether, the workbooks and other things. Also, if you do a simple Google search, you know, you go to WSDOT Transit and, you know, CSR or compliance site review, federal compliance, those things, you can navigate there pretty simply. So with that, I will pause and I'll check the chat, see if any questions came up. Let's see here.
Yeah, we have a question from Julie. So she said, in the workbook, do you have an overall desk review section and an overall site review section, or do you have those sections within each review category?
Yeah, we have certain things that we ask to have submitted ahead of time. You know, in particular, you know, there's certain documentation. Again, maybe it's like an updated policy or plan, you know, I don't know, safety or maintenance or Title VI or, you know, things along those lines. So we ask those folks to share that ahead of time. Now, not everybody is as responsive to, you know, getting things to us before. So, you know, if we're expecting something to look at, doesn't come in, then, you know, we just make a note of it and try to have them pull it up when we're on site and do a quick review in that way.
Awesome. And then, go ahead.
Yeah.
You got it.
Agencies have technology to participate in virtual reviews. You know, so far we have not had issues with that virtual review. You know, truthfully, parts of, you know, northern Wisconsin are quite rural. It's quite you know, forested, and you know, cell reception and internet access is not always great. So that is something that we, you know, we are cognizant of, but you know, from the feedback I've got, you know, it's never been something that has been insurmountable. So you know, so far so good. Fingers crossed.
Dawn, I know you said you had a question. Would you like to ask that now?
Sure. I want to follow up on your comment about we're here to help tech language. Both some of our staff and some of our smaller grantees get really nervous when you talk about using language in certain ways. I heard you use the word audit. I heard you use deficiencies. I was wondering if internal to your organization, if you have any understanding or expectations about language. So for example, we're currently debating, is it a deficiency? Is it a finding? Is it a corrective action?
So yeah,
where you go ahead.
So yeah, that's a great question, and honestly something we have thought about quite a lot. And you know, I use the term audit for this group in this presentation. I would say we don't call it that when we talk about the program, certainly externally. We talk about it as a review. We don't really talk about it in deficiencies. I think we use the term more findings. And it's, you know, we try to be soft around it, to be honest. And I would say I know I've experienced reviews from the federal and state level where they've been very painful, you know, kind of adversarial and, you know, challenging to work through, and it's very unpleasant. And so, but then the flip side, you know, I've had other more positive reviews, and it, you know, it was like, okay, yep, this is something we didn't do quite right. Let's learn from it and let's move on. So, all that said, you know, my goal, my philosophy is that we want to be a helpful partner to these organizations and demonstrate that we're kind of in it with them side by side. And so we use a little bit softer language, and you know, try to sugarcoat things like, you know, over the top, but you know, at the same time, you know, try to be mindful of the language that we're using and the perception around these types of things.
Thank you.
Awesome. Looks like we have another question. Do you incorporate best practices into your reviews?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we kind of keep a I'll call it like a repository, you know, running total of best practices in different areas that we see from, you know, organization to organization, and we can say, okay, you know, we were out at, you know, this 5311 system, you know, last year, and they did this in a really nice way. So we, you know, we kind of copy that and then we share it to somebody else. So we've got a folder that we make available to folks and just try to, share those best practices. We don't hoard them, we share them. And I'll make that comment to this group as well. I mean, we're all state DOTs, we're all doing more or less the same thing. And, we're happy to share whatever resources and experiences that we have in this program.
Are there any states, like Ian's saying, that, everybody has to deal with compliance across the board, and especially now with it being a lot of people having to do them virtually, are there any states that want to speak up that have some additional techniques or ideas that they're doing that are working really well that would be beneficial for the group to hear? And Richard does have the power to unmute you, so we can call on people.
Well, we can save the embarrassing stuff for later. I promise you, folks on the phone, there is a discussion period where I do have the power to unmute you, and I will. But I also saw that in the chat that is it Julie Mattis has a question. Do you want to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question for Ian?
It was already answered.
Oh, okay, perfect. Kristen, you want to unmute yourself? You don't have to go on camera. Just ask the question you had.
Yeah. So Ian, I was just wondering. So in your one of your opening slides, you said that you did the compliance reviews every 5 years or based on risk. So how do you? And maybe you covered this. And Zoom school was too loud in my background here, but maybe. Could you tell me how you do the risk assessment, and does that mean you do them more or less frequently because of that? And so how do you just, determine?
Yeah.
The risk?
Yeah. So, risk, I mean, that's one of the, risk is kind of a core thing that, financial auditors will look at it also, FTA, applies that as well. So we wanted to have, we needed to have some sort of risk assessment as well. We started off fairly simply. We looked at all the organizations that we had, and we looked at things like the budget and kind of, complexity of their service, larger dollar amount service, programs, higher risk, more routes, different activities, higher risk. And then we set out kind of an initial schedule. From there, we do things, we always check it annually, and we look at other factors like, okay, is this an organization, did they struggle with their first review? Should we come back after 3 years rather than 5? Are they a new subrecipient? And we want to get them up and running for 1 or 2 years, and then we come in. Do they have a particular project? Let's say like a facility construction project. Things like that. So it brings in, try to bring in objective and subjective factors into the risk assessment. We have written out the criteria as well. If you would like, I can share kind of those criteria with you offline later. So
Yeah,
that's how I'll address all the risk elements.
Yeah, and I've often thought about incorporating, like staff turnover as,
Yep.
A need to do more frequent reviews.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
yeah, I'd love
that
list.
is a factor that we've considered as well. Do they have a new transit manager? Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ian, so much. We're going to keep moving along. We have another presentation. So these have been just great comments so far. So I think this last presentation is really going to tie it all together. So with that, I'll introduce Deborah. So Deborah works with the rural transit programs, and she's a supervisor for New Mexico Department of Transportation in the Transit Bureau. And she has been with the Transit Bureau for more than 5 years. She is a graduate from SUNY Buffalo with a master's in economics. Collectively, she has more than 20 years of experience in project and program management and leadership in both the public and the private sectors. So Deborah currently serves as the project lead for the Transit Bureau's robust electronic award management system, which is through Panther, and that's Black Cat. New Mexico DOT is currently implementing a new DBE reporting module for their Section 5311 funded programs. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Deborah.
Thank you, Rachel. That was a
That was a lovely introduction. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for attending this great section of our virtual conference. So, Richard, can you move to the next slide, please? So let me just give you a quick snapshot of New Mexico public transportation. In FY21, we awarded $28.5 million in federal funds, 1.6 million in state funds over a 2-year, will be awarded over a 2-year state fiscal year, and 3.1 in discretionary funds were awarded for FY21. We currently have 37 5310 subrecipients, and like Ian, you know, some of these are just 1 or 2 time vehicle recipients, but we still provide oversight to them as long as we hold the lien on the vehicles. We currently have 20 5311 subrecipients that we oversee and 2 5307 subrecipients that are receiving 5307 funds that we apply for and manage for them in trams. Next slide, please. So when I was developing this PowerPoint, I thought about all the tools and practices that really make our program robust in many ways. Regarding the grant management, the subrecipient piece, keeping the funding flowing. The first is the award management software piece, which is, of course, as Rachel mentioned, we work with Black Hat. We've had the system implemented since 2017 of spring, and I've had the pleasure to work with the system from its inception. It was we purchased a semi-customized package, and we've kept up with it. You know, I'm the full-time program manager for the system, and I feel like that's part of the success of our system. As we evolve our program, our program management on this at the state level, we're evolving our Black Cat program as well. We're not just adapting our practices to what we bought, we're adapting the system to how we change and move forward and progress with our system. We are constantly adding component modules, we're making updates and enhancements, and like Rachel mentioned, we're currently ready to launch a DBE module, which we're super excited about. Our comprehensive oversight program, like Ian's program, is pretty robust. We cover 13 different aspects of the federal programs during our oversight. We currently conduct all of our oversight through our Black Cat module, from the questionnaire through the reconciliation of findings and implementation of recommendations. We also have a desk review prior to the actual site visit. We were doing our site visits in person. We're starting to do those virtually in the month of January. We also provide robust technical assistance through our oversight program in Black Hat, which is kind of a new thing that we started. The template works great for technical assistance. It's usually an offshoot of the oversight. You know, we do a risk assessment like Ian was talking about, and if we feel that the agency needs more technical assistance, we'll schedule that as a separate event in Black Cat. Award assistance.
I think we just lost her.
Hey, I got a question. for Ian while we wait.
Please go ahead.
I wanted to follow up on what you said about, we're talking about risk assessments. And I was curious, and I'm sorry if I missed this in your presentation, do you give out state dollars in addition to federal dollars, and do your risk assessments impact what color of money you give to your grantees?
You know, by and large, our programs are really, well, yeah, we have some programs that are standalone state. We have some that are blended federal and state together. And particularly on the public transit side, they're really, it's kind of formula based. So we honestly don't have a ton of discretion in,
Gotcha.
awarding projects or not, so on the operating side. But, you know, I would say in some instances, we have utilized poor CSR reviews, and, you know, sort of lack of follow-up as, you know, as justification to not award some discretionary projects, like potentially like a capital funding. So, you know, if somebody was really, you know, didn't do well and just was not being responsive to implement corrective actions, you know, we held that against them basically, and because they just, you know, they weren't holding up. We didn't feel they were holding up the end of the bargain, and couldn't, under, you know, competitive programs, we couldn't in good faith, you know, award that project. So.
Gotcha. No, we've basically gotten to the point now, and whenever we see her come back in, I'll stop talking. Where we do have state buckets of money that essentially mirror our federal buckets, that we have discretion on how we use them. And because of that, we've gone more and more in the direction of only, for example, giving 5311 to the rural transit agencies, and using state dollars to give to, well, state and 5210 to give to the nonprofits and to tribal organizations, as a kind of a strategy to reduce the complexity that comes with 5311. That, you know, in terms of having to manage the drug and alcohol program and asset management and things like that. So.
Awesome. Well, since we lost Deb on her presentation and we only have a couple minutes left, we'll just, maybe Richard will just open it up at this point to any questions at all for any of our remaining panelists, or any topic that we've been talking about today. Does anybody have any burning questions in these last few minutes that we have?
I have a question for the group. And so whether it's Ian, whether it is our brain trust as a whole, kind of follows up on the question you asked before, Rachel, about the technology and using technology in site visits. We do it for a lot, but there's certain things that we haven't, you know, I'm a little concerned about. So for example, assessing the status of a vehicle. Have people walk around a vehicle with a camera pointing at the VIN number and the OW. Do you have, let's see, what was it? Oh, you know, one of the things I know we get dinged on all the time is securing drug and alcohol files in a secure location. And so have you come up with ways to check on those things? And I'd be curious to hear from, well, either Ian or anybody who's on the call this morning.
I mean, I can speak to the, you know, the drug and alcohol one, you know, and we just had a specific drug and alcohol program review, 2019, which was a humbling experience in some ways. But you know, one of the things that we do is, you know, we make sure that the files are in a, you know, secured location. Sometimes it's a little bit challenging because, especially if the service is contracted service, you know, we have, you know, third-party providers contracted in a lot of our small shared ride taxi systems. And, you know, those kind of like the HR records and things like that, are held at an offsite location, not in the community that we're actually reviewing. And so it's, kind of have to approach those a little bit differently. But, some things are,
I think I missed an important part of my question, which is if you're doing site visits virtually, so how do you check on those things? And so, and I'm not sure if anyone has got a good answer for that right now.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer to that. I think it's something that, we kind of do the best we can under the circumstances, and which is maybe a photo and or sort of relying on affirmations from the subrecipients, which is is not as reliable perhaps, but it's the best we can do at the moment.
Awesome. So it looks like we have time for one more, and we had a question from Charles. Do you have any advice for taking on new subrecipients, such as educating and guiding them, especially when they're new and there's a lot to take in?
Yeah, I can chime in on that as well. So separate from our CSR program, we call it a grantee guide, which is geared more, I would say, a little more practically, kind of a 101 about what it means to be a public transit 5311 subrecipient or a 5310 subrecipient. It really kind of lays out some roles, responsibilities, and some expectations. But like I said, it's more practical. The CSR really is more focused on that federal compliance element. And if we have a situation, as this alluded to earlier, but if we have a situation where it's a brand new subrecipient or maybe a new transit manager at a organization, then we try to give them a little time to maybe get settled, and then come check on them before too long.
Great. Well, I want to just thank everybody again for being here, and thank you to our panelists for just doing an excellent job of kind of explaining just the tools and techniques that they're using. Hopefully it was a value of everybody today. I think it's very clear that everybody can glean from something from each other and rely on each other to really assist, especially just in these unique times that we're in. And of course, Black Hat is an asset, not only on the agency end, but on the state end, and looking to the future of integrating and just working with all these different partnerships. So thank you again, everybody, for being here. Richard, I'll let you kind of finish us out, but thank you guys for being here.
Thanks everyone for joining us today. Please also don't forget, join us again at 1 p.m. Eastern for session number 7, update on NCHRP, TCRP, how better leveraging in-kind funding for local match, and cybersecurity preparedness planning. Look forward to seeing everyone later today, 1 o'clock Eastern. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good rest of the day. See you in an hour.
Bye.